Hey guys, Matthew here once again with a slightly memeier than usual meme amount of build, and that is a retackling of the Poisonous Conch transfigured version that bounces as a cast on crit variant, this time as a Pathfinder. So it is Unarmed CoC, and it is using a Doriani's Fist for extra damage, and it is using Blazing Salvo as the proc. So the Bouncy Concoction is the trigger rate, and then the proc is whatever we kind of want it to be, but it needed to be something that scales off projectiles, because we want to scale projectiles to scale bounces to scale the proc rate, and then ultimately, something with projectiles for the trigger the end result. And Blazing Salvo seems to make some of the most sense for that. Other such notable things are like Ice Spear. Winter does okay. Forbidden Rite is pretty good, but you've got to build it completely differently. Creeping Frost scales with Proj well as well. So something like that utilizes projectiles more and more for shotgunning kind of purposes. But in the end, for this character, as I built it, Blazing Salvo seemed to perform the best. And so the character is revolved around scaling some projectiles, but it's from the form of Pathfinder into Dying Sun. So the character's design was to try and use the Bouncy Concoction to get more projectiles to bounce better, and go from Pathfinder Infinite Flask scaling to get Dying Sun at 100% uptime just on repeat, and give us 4 additional projectiles. The end result is not too bad of a build. It is using an energy shield on hit Watcher's Eye, which is helping me sustain infinite amounts of energy shield, as you can see there, with my cast when damage taken setup as well. The idea is, with all the procs and with all the hits from the Concoction, I'm getting a huge amount of energy shield on hit, as well as some leech and instant leech. So essentially I was just trying to make sure I was taking some reduced damage, but some kind of energy shield pool, and then a huge amount of sustain to keep everything going. The challenge in the character was to try and get 100% Flask effect, so that Dying Sun could give us 4 projectiles instead of the usual 2, and then also make sure that it was up 100% of the time. So we had to have Pathfinder, had to use the new Tides of Time belt for 6 charges total, regen every 3 seconds, and then increased Flask charges gained, so that you'd get even more of those Flask charges back. Instead of getting 6, I think I was getting something like 13 every 3 seconds. And then also increase some of your Flask duration, and hopefully reduce some of your other Flasks consumption, and it ends up being infinitely sustaining. So this is kind of a Mageblood at home setup for your blue Flasks, because they will be very easily infinitely sustained, and then you can chuck in a few unique Flasks that should also be infinitely sustained and also doubled in power. So as you can see, I'm also using Wise Oak and Roomies. Wise Oak ends up giving us like 16 Ellie Pen, I think, and I have triple balanced it as well, so it's giving 12 damage reduction to all elements, and then the Dying Sun itself gives up to 85 max res because of the doubling of effect. So it's basically a Pathfinder that scales a whole bunch of Flask shit, and then I tried to make a Bouncy Concoction cast on crit, and the end result is, it's not super good, unfortunately. Like, the character works, the character has some damage, the character has some defense or sustain and stuff, but the DPS is pretty fucking lackluster for my worldview of a cast on crit build, considering I probably spent about 30 to 40 divines trying to get this whole thing up and running for all the Flask effect, the Dying Sun, the gear, all that type of shit. The end result, I think, is pretty lackluster. This is like regular Maven DPS, and it's nothing crazy, but it's enough to, get through these regular boss fights and tier 16s and Guardians and do that comfortably. It's not super fast, and then it's enough to hate tier 17s as always, right? You need a pretty busted build and pretty busted DPS to enjoy tier 17s, or at least, not completely hate and struggle through them. Currently, I ended up trying 3 tier 17s on this character, and I cleared all 3 of them, largely thanks to the portal scarab that helps you not consume portals during using them. Because yeah, I did the three different tier 17s, and I probably needed about 10 portals to clear each of them during some of the bosses and some of the just map mods that made monsters worse mechanics and stuff. So, you know, what it didn't even really feel like ethical clearing because I was using extra portals, and yeah. The DPS for the clear isn't too bad. The Bouncy Concoction does okay in its own right there, and it does have overlap, so it's not bad on single target as well. The real big problem is that I did all this work and I made sure that I was going unarmed and trying out Bouncy Concoction to have a result that is just kinda worse than Lancing Steel. And that is the premier trigger at the moment. If you're not doing Cyclone, then Lancing Steel is basically the play, and it's just better, I think. Like, as far as I could tell, I tried it out a little bit, and yeah, I'm pretty sure Lancing Steel just going to be much more of the play. So you can see my character enjoy the next tier 17 I entered, and it sure was enjoyable. It's the Shaper Touch mod, which I've come across before, but I don't know, I just could not get away from things. Sometimes here I'm doing a quick dash and then whoops, did that too quick before I was about to get attacked. So yeah, can be some stuff. Got a bit more into it on the next attempt, and then yeah, managed to like clear most of the map. But the boss fight itself still took me quite a lot of doing. So yeah, I was pleased with how Pathfinder scaling worked for the build. Like, doubling your flasks is pretty damn strong, and having infinite flask sustain is very damn strong. So that is some tech that could be used going forward in other builds and other situations, and it's likely that I should get a Taste of Hate into this as well, double that, and then have better early damage taken as. A Bottled Faith would be huge as well. I just kind of didn't really want to put another 10 Divine Flask in the build, but an infinite sustained Bottled Faith like gives me a whole bunch more damage, and yeah, it's just a bit of a learning experience for memes for a character. So I think it memed a bit too much. The Bouncy Concoction does crit and proc well enough, but just not well enough to really justify using it, I think. So going forward from here, you can see I get fisted by this boss a good few times. Going forward from here, I think I will actually try and rebuild the character real quick to Lancing Steel and also a Forbidden Rite variant. And then if that works out to some extent where it's worth sharing, I'll have another video talking about Forbidden Rite cast on crit as this type of a build, because it might be something I can save the character with and then also share as a separate kind of little build. Anyway, let me just show you how I built this character thus far. So I'll go no cam because I just had a shower and hair's still kind of wet and I look like a bit of a dickhead. So anyway, we've got Fistful of Cock, level 93 Pathfinder. Like I said, the idea was to build around Poison's Concoction of Bouncing, because I thought it could be a pretty decent cast on crit trigger when I last played the skill a couple builds ago, and I didn't really want to leave that stone unturned until like next league. Normally I'll only play, you know, skill once a league, but I really wanted to explore this time around again. And yeah, like I said, it's something, but it's not, I'm not really sure it's too worth doing. It might be worth doing if it's like a poison crit variant, kind of like I did on my assassin last league, as a, like maybe an assassin, poison concoction crit into something like Soul End or Forbidden Rite, and then poison variant. I think that could still have some potential, but otherwise it's probably just better to be doing something like Lancing Steel and just a better cast on crit trigger. I tried to justify doing this because you don't have a weapon by using Doriani's Fist, because that gives you 100 to 300 lightning damage to spells while unarmed, so you would think that that can kind of make up for the lack of a weapon, and it kind of does, but the trigger rate of this just probably still isn't quite as comfortable as something like a Lancing Steel, and you got to wait for some of the bounces sometimes, so it can be a bit wonky. It still feels kind of nice in certain situations when you're standing still and, you know, you can proc all over the place just because it's bouncing everywhere, but yeah, maybe it's just not that worthwhile. And then this character, As a whole, it is a Pathfinder. It went CI because getting a good life pool with the amount of other stuff I was doing was going to be tough. So it's CI and still not even with that much energy shield. And most of the sustain is entirely around 30 energy shield gained per hit with discipline, and then the rest of the tree is doing a bunch of stuff, and a lot of it is involved in getting flask effect. So flask effect pretty much everywhere has to be utilized to get 100% flask effect. We have to anoint this one, we have to get effect there, we have to get effect from 5% there, we have to get effect from Alchemist Genius, and we have to get effect from the belt and also the implicit on the chest. And all of that should come together to give us 100%. No points wasted, basically. So even our little Pathfinder nodes here, our last few points don't really mean anything. So we took 2 small passives instead, and yeah, the last 5% from one of these is what gives us 100%. So 95% means you will not get 4 additional proj from Dying Sun. You need 100%, and then you get the 4th additional proj. So it does take a bit of work, especially with the implicit like this, because you have to do conflict orbs to get flasks applied at an exquisite level, and that's pretty painful, but it can be worthwhile in the end. So if I respec to Forbidden Rite, I will probably go for Nature's Reprisals. I'll get rid of Master Alchemist, because the way I've got the flask set up to use when charges reach full means that this basically never does anything anyway, because as soon as it doesn't consume flasks for a proc rate, then it just goes again. So currently this doesn't even matter, it doesn't do anything, but it can if you instead do use charges at the end of the use, for example. So the other flasks end up doing increased effect, and then something like either attack speed or crit or movement speed, whatever else you want, but we've got attack speed here and increased effect, and over here Wise Oak is just going to give us 12% damage reduction and 16 penetration. And then I used a Roomies because my shield that I made from the graveyard gave me a lot of block, so I thought, oh shit, I've got 40 block, chuck a Roomies on, and all of a sudden, just from the shield and the Roomies, I end up having 64% chance to block, which is pretty cool. But it doesn't really keep me alive that much more than I would otherwise be alive, because block kind of fucking sucks these days, and we'd be better off wearing a Taste of Hate anyway. But I tried to do a Roomies just for the block memes, and yeah, I don't know, something, maybe, cool. Either way, I'll probably chuck a Taste of Hate on for the attempt of the Forbidden Rite Lancing Steel Pivot anyway. So I did try and also use Yoke of Suffering so that my Blazing Salvo could shock, and at the same time I tried to get as many ailments as possible in the build. So we got Scorch from this hat instead of Ignite. Scorch also gives us the extra Ellie pen that we wanted, so we went with Scorch, Chill. I do also have Shock from this, and then the Bouncy Concoction itself poisons, and then also because I have 4 to 9 flat physical damage on my attack, I think that's just from unarmed base damage, I can also utilize a jewel with 4% chance to bleed. That gives me another ailment, so in the end we should have from Yoke 50% increased damage taken on the enemy, and thus justifying the item itself. I did previously have this node here, 1 strength node turned into 5% chance to bleed thanks to a tattoo, and that was going to do the same thing. So yeah, that's kind of the gearing choices there. Went with a Call of the Void, so I'd always chill and shatter things and also give some damage reduction. Went with a Shav's Ring for a lot of ES, just in the left hand slot, and then at the same time it was also giving me some good mana sustain. So my mana is being sustained from this regen, from this mana on hit, and also the leech from my attack. So mana was being taken care of like that, and then yep, Tides of Time for the 3 flask charges and 25 effect, and just some boots with a bit of brittle and some resists. These are from crafts of the graveyard, so just a bunch of defense and stuff, a bunch of defense and, you know, less life, less mana. pretty reliable, like triple tier 1 sort of crafts. That's just the world we live in. And then it's up to the suffixes as to what you can or want to do. I got Ailment Avoid, doesn't really do much for me. Recharge Start does actual fuck all because of this ring. So yeah, just some stuff you can make. The links here are Poisonous Conch, Cast on Crit, Crit Strikes, and then Crit Damage, Inspiration, and then Blazing Salvo. As I said, I did try out pretty much every other spell, and this seemed to work the nicest. But there could be other options too. Who knows? And then Forbidden Rite with Lancing Steel. It's probably what I'm going to try as a bit of a respec. It's going to take quite a lot of work because I will have to remove the clusters. I'll have to re-gear, I have to re-passive a bit. And also I didn't mention this Brutal Restraint. This one I basically did just to give increased Flask charges gained, because that will give us a lot of Flask charges, and that helps for just the infinite sustain on the regen of Flasks. Other than that, yeah, my clusters do just some Ellie and stuff like that, and one cluster to fit more auras in, and then some crit, and some crit multi from the jewels, I think, is pretty much all. Yeah, bit of extra crit and stuff like that. So yeah, that's the build, that's the character. Hope that made sense. Hope that was fun to try and understand the way I did as well. Maybe Bouncy Poison CoC is good for some reasons for cast on crit. I didn't particularly find it this time around. It was a functional enough build. It took a lot to get going, but I would not say it's worth doing. So hopefully, if I figure something out with the Lancing Steel version, I'll let you know. But for now, thank you very much for watching. See you guys next time.